dear friends and net aspirants, welcome back to High Point again, and this is Ligi Maria, and today we are going to learn about an important person, an important literary theoretician known as F.R. Leavis, who lived from 1895 to 1978. Okay, so Leavis's lifespan was from 1895 to 1978, and we will see his major concepts and works as a literary critic who belongs to the new criticism. Okay, and like you can see me and have the free materials that we are providing here in YouTube. You can also have many types and different kinds of free materials in my Instagram page as well. You can have all of them if you follow my Instagram page, and we are providing systematically arranged, affordable and well explained, simplified study materials in my website www.highpoint.in. You can visit it, and you can have the free trial and have the demo materials and see whatever we have provided under 11 subjects. So we have provided some total 900 plus audio lectures and 300 plus PDF materials and practice and a previous set of question papers which are lively attemptable in the website as many times as possible you wanted to have them. So you can get all these materials provided there on the website with a 15% of off going on in the website, and along with these study materials we are providing bonuses such as weekly test in every Saturdays and personalized study guidelines which are customized especially for you, and we will revise the study guidelines as you progress in your studies. Okay, so if you want to know more about the website, the course materials and the details related to the course and the bonuses and the offer, whatever it is, you can call me or WhatsApp me in the given number, or in the Instagram page too you can contact me. Okay, moving on, we are going to learn about F.R. Leavis. Let's have an introduction. What is the expansion of his name? His his initials. Frank Raymond Leavis was an English literary critic. Leavis attacked the late Victorian poetry and celebrated the work of modern poets such as T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound and Gerard Manley Hopkins in his Bearings in English Poetry. So he came up with a work known as Bearings in English Poetry in the year 1931, and in this work Leavis actually attacked the late Victorian poets and their poetry, but he celebrated the works of modern poets such as T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound and Gerard Manley Hopkins. And he even critically looked at 17th century poetry in his Revaluation, Tradition and Development in English Poetry, published in the year 1936. So he even critically looked at and he analyzed 17th century poetry in his work Revaluation, Tradition and Development in English Poetry in the year 1936. In great tradition, see, in many literary theory and criticism paper I have seen this essay by F.R. Leavis, The Great Tradition, which was published in the year 1948. In this work, he put forward a case for moral seriousness as criteria for great work of art. Actually, he proposed moral seriousness as a great criteria, as a one of the major element that should have in a great work of art. In his essay known as The Great Tradition, in his work known as Great Tradition in the year 1948. Now, he considered Jane Austen, George Eliot, Henry James, Joseph Conrad as the greatest novelists. Jane Austen and George Eliot, both of them, and Jane Austen belongs to the Romantic age. George Eliot belongs to which age? George Eliot belongs to Victorian age. Henry James is a American writer. Joseph Conrad is a modern novelist of English literature. So these novelists he considered as great novelists, and he founded Scrutiny. So he founded a great journal of literature known as Scrutiny, one of the most influential literary periodicals of the 20th century. So F.R. Leavis is the one who founded Scrutiny, the great influential literary periodicals of the 20th century. Then Leavis is associated with the Cambridge School of Criticism, which also included I. Richards, Q.D. Leavis and William Emerson. See, I. Richards, William Emerson, these people belong to which literary theory? They are new critics, right? So Leavis also associated with the Cambridge School of Criticism. So I. Richards, Q.D. Leavis and William Emerson, all these people are also associated with the Cambridge School of Criticism. Leavis also included in it. Each of them studied in the University of Cambridge and rejected historical and biographical analysis of the text in favor of close reading of the text themselves. So like any other new critic like I. Richards, William Emerson, Cleand Brooks, these people, especially I. Richards, Q.D. Leavis, William Emerson and F.R. Leavis, these people, they studied in University of Cambridge, and like any other new critics, these people, they rejected the necessity of studying historical and biographical things related to a text in order to understand and interpret a text in a better way. Rather, they favored close reading of the text themselves. Now let's see some major concepts of Leavis. Leavis is often viewed as having been a better critic of poetry than of novels. He has criticized and analyzed both poetry and novel, but he was always and often regarded as a better critic of poetry. See, in new criticism and in Russian formalism, mainly poetry was of the focus point, okay? Leavis attacked the Victorian poetical ideal, suggesting that 19th century poetry sought the consciously poetical and showed a separation of thought and feeling and a divorce from the real world. Like I said in the introductory part, Leavis actually attacked Victorian poetical ideals, and he suggested why he attacked and why he criticized the Victorian poems, because he suggested that 19th century poetry sought the consciously poetical, and it actually tried to be consciously a poetical thing, not naturally. So it actually deviated and divorced from the real world and showed a separation of thought and feeling. It is not merged. Thought and feelings are not merged into one, fused into one, but it showed a separation of thought and feeling because it was consciously trying to be poetical. So because of this problem, because of this tendency that he found in the 19th century poetry, he attacked the Victorian poetical ideals. Okay, he said that it was T.S. Eliot who made conscious of the weakness of the tradition fully. See, T.S. Eliot came up with the tradition and individual talent. He was also like, you have to have some traditional consciousness, and that should be reflected in your work more than your personal feelings. So it was, according to Leavis, it was T.S. Eliot who made conscious, who made aware, who actually brought into light the weakness of that tradition in the sense Victorian poetical tradition fully. And his criticism considerably enhanced the popularity of Eliot and Hopkins. So he was in favor of the works and the concepts of T.S. Eliot and Gerard Hopkins. So his criticism, Leavis's criticism, considerably enhanced and even promoted the popularity of both T.S. Eliot and Hopkins. Now let's see what are Leavis's concepts related to novel, his criticism of novels, as well as his concept of great tradition. The great novelists show an intense moral interest in life. See, like I said, great tradition, in his great tradition, that work, he says the necessity of having moral greatness in great work or moral integrity in great work. So the great novelist, he observes that they had an intense moral interest in their own life, and that this novel moral interest determines the nature of their form in fiction. So since they have an intense, very curious and very very serious moral interest in their life, that interest in their life, that moral interest in their life, that showed and reflected the moral interest and nature of their form in fiction. So when they formulate a form for the fiction, this moral interest that they already have in their life reflected. He labeled the novelists such as Jane Austen, George Eliot, Henry James, Joseph Conrad, D.H. Lawrence, a modern novelist who has written Sons and Lovers. D.H. Lawrence as great novelist who were characterized with a serious or responsible attitude to the moral complexity of life. So actually he labeled, try to remember these authors, okay? Jane Austen, George Eliot, Henry James, Joseph Conrad and D.H. Lawrence in particular, he labeled these novelists as great novelists. On what basis he is labeling, or he labeled these novelists as a great novelist? Because they had a characteristic of seriousness and responsible attitude to the moral complexity of life. We can see such a moral complexity of life in their work, because in their life itself they had an interest and intense moral background, moral interest in their life. So that actually reflected in their work as well, bringing about a moral complexity of life in them. So which are the novelists that he widely acclaimed as great writers, great novelists? Jane Austen, George Eliot, Henry James, Joseph Conrad and D.H. Lawrence. But he excluded Thomas Hardy, Charles Dickens from the list. See, Thomas Hardy and Charles Dickens, these are some tremendous novelists, as they brought about many number of great novels into English tradition. But still he excluded, he never labeled Thomas Hardy, Charles Dickens in the list of great novelists, because he never considered that they are morally responsible, and they, in their work we can see moral complexity of life, okay? So which are the authors that he consciously excluded from this list? Thomas Hardy and Charles Dickens, both of them belong to Victorian age. In the great tradition, Leavis attempted to set out his conception of the proper relation between form and composition and moral interest or art and life. So in this work by Leavis, in the great tradition, he tried to set out his concept of the relation between form, composition and moral interest and art and life. So how these three things are related to each other, okay? How form or composition and moral interest and art is related to life. So he tried to bring about his concept, how properly these things are related to each other. Form composition means the formalistic, the form of a work, and moral interest and art that is there in a work, and life, how these things are related. So he refused to separate art from life or the aesthetic or formal form of the moral. So he says that the life and art, they are infused, and at the same time the aesthetic quality of work is fused with the moralist, or is infused with the form of the moral. So it's not that they are separate. The formal aspect of the work is separate from the aesthetic quality of the work or the moral complexity of life that is there in the work. So everything is infused together. So he refused to separate art from life, the aesthetic or formal from the moral. So aesthetic and formal form is actually very much connected to the moral complexity that is there in a work. He insisted that, see, according to that moral complexity that you have, that you are going to reflect such a form, such a formalist thing that you can find in that work. He insisted that the great novelist's preoccupation with form was a matter of responsibility towards a rich moral interest. See, these great novelists, they actually bring about great forms of art. More than their concept that they are discussing in their work, they actually preoccupied with the matter of bringing about great forms of work. Why? Because they had a matter of responsibility towards the rich moral interest that they need to bring about in their work. That's why suitably they need to bring about a particular form, a form of work in their work. So a work of art with a limited formal concern would always be out of lesser quality. See, he never separates, he refused to separate what? The aesthetic quality or the moral interest or the form of the work. These things are interconnected. Even nature and life, art, all these things are coming together. So the old or the ancient novelist or artists, they had a consciousness about the form that they are creating in a work. So because of this, if a work of art with a less or limited formal concern, if the work is not concerned with its formal aspects, then it would always be of lesser quality. However, what kind of things are discussed in that, if it is less concerned about the formal aspect of that work, then or it will be always a lesser quality work. Okay, so that these are Leavis's concepts. Okay, now let's see some major texts produced by Leavis. New Bearings in English Poetry came out in the year 1932. See, actually he has written many number of works. I mentioned only important ones. Okay, so pause the video and write it down, and while I'm reading you also read along. Okay, New Bearings in English Poetry in the year 1932. Evaluation, Tradition and Development in English Poetry, printed in the year 1936. The Great Tradition, remember him for this work. Okay, The Great Tradition, printed in the year 1948, and this appreciated George Orwell but criticized for his extremely limited vision, especially in that he allows no space for the comic, the grotesque and the carnivalesque. So he, in this work, along with some other novelists, like we have seen Jane Austen, George Eliot, Joseph Conrad and all, he also appreciated George Orwell, but he criticized him for his extremely limited, less vision, and he had no space for the comic or grotesque or the carnivalesque in his work. Can you remember some of the works by George Orwell? He has written Animal Farm, he has written Burmese Days, he has written 1984 and many more works. So he was born in Bihar, Motihari, a place in Bihar, and he actually served in police force of British empire, and he very much related to India. So remember him and George Orwell. So he was criticized, even though Leavis appreciated Orwell, but he criticized his limited vision, and especially in that he had no space for comic, grotesque and the carnivalesque in his works. Okay, next work is The Common Pursuit, came out in the year 1952, and D.H. Lawrence, novelist, was published in the year 1955, and Dickens, the novelist. See, Dickens and Hardy, they were excluded from the list of great novelists. Okay, The Living Principles, English as a Discipline of Thought, in the year 1975. Thought, Words and Creativity, Art and Thought in Lawrence, in the year 1976. I'll read the titles again, read with me. Okay, New Bearings in English Poetry, Re-evaluation, Tradition and Development in English Poetry, The Great Tradition, The Common Pursuit, D.H. Lawrence, novelist, Dickens, the novelist, The Living Principle, English as a Discipline of Thought, Words and Creativity, Art and Thought in Lawrence. So these are the major works by F.R. Leavis. So that's all about major concepts by F.R. Leavis as a new critic. And if you have any doubts, queries, and along with that, your major takeaways, also mention that in the comment section, and visit our website www.highpoint.in to know more about the courses and the topics and the materials and offers and bonuses that we are providing there. And here is my Instagram ID, like in YouTube, you can follow me on Instagram as well for having this entire pool of free materials that we are providing in these platforms. Meet you in the next video session. Until then, stay tuned to High Point and be happy in your life, guys. Ta-ta.